Hello, I'm Marilla Cushman, a staff member at the Women in Military Service for America Memorial. Located at the gateway to Arlington National Cemetery, it's America's only major national memorial to tell the story of the some 3 million women who've served this nation beginning with the American Revolution. It's my privilege today to introduce and assist my boss, Army retired Chief Warrant Officer 5, Phyllis Wilson, as she participates in her summit session titled Her Story, Make Your Mark. Phyllis is a 37-year veteran of the Army and the Army Reserve, retiring in 2018. Today, she is the president of the Women's Memorial Foundation. I thoroughly understand why Phyllis was asked to take this particular session, because you are truly the consummate example of someone who's made your mark, and she has left her mark. She's a private to CW5, a high school diploma to multiple degrees and counting. She was a mom, a warrior, a soldier, and nurse, and so much more. Phyllis finalized her stellar Army career as the 5th Command Chief Warrant Officer of the United States Army Reserve. She has a great professional story, success story for sure, and her life journey and how she's chosen to live her life are truly inspirational. So thank you, Phyllis, for taking the time to share your story today.
Well, and thank you, Marilla. And I have to brag on her for a quick second, if you don't mind. She's very humble. 25 years in the Army, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and her last job was working, she's public relations, public affairs kind of a person. And so she worked for the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon was her last job. And in 1997, as this building behind us, the memorial, was getting ready to be, it was being built and ready to be dedicated, Marilla retired from the Pentagon and on a Friday, and on Monday, she was here working for the foundation that was working to finalize the memorial. So she started in early 97, and in October of 97 is when this building was officially opened. So, and I'm just honored to be here. I'm sorry. I'm just honored to be here to help tell the story about this fantastic memorial that's here for every woman that has ever defended this country.
So I think this is when we say hooah.
Yeah, hooah, because we're Army.
For sure. Well, thank you again, Phyllis, for agreeing to and taking the time to come and tell your remarkable story. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. Where did you ever get this incredible desire to do great things? And what was your inspiration? What did you do as a kid? Tell us a little bit about that.
I was a tremendous tomboy. I am one of 5 kids, my 2 older sisters, and then my 2 younger brothers. And it always seemed like my sisters were all into the very girly things. And so I was that horrible tyrant middle child that cut the hair on my sister's Barbie dolls. And so they always sent me away to go play with my brothers, which was fine. My dad had been raised Amish, horse and buggy, and so we understood what it was to work hard. We had an acre garden, and that's a daunting task for a child. You don't realize how much work is involved in that. But nobody in my family had ever served in the military that I knew about at the time, and nor had anybody attended college. So both of those seemed, scary, unusual, and unknown to me. And my dad had clearly let us know that, we weren't he was not a man of means. If we were going to go to college, it was on our own. So after I graduated from high school, I tried to go through community college, working and paying my own way through. I didn't know anything but that. And did the math and said, I'm going to be 25 before I have an associate's degree. So started looking around and went to different recruiting stations. And for me, somehow the Army just seemed to be that good fit. And that's how I ended up joining the Army.
Where did you grow up?
All over, Ohio, Michigan, New York, and Florida. I joined the Army from Sarasota, Florida. Had been a lifeguard when I was like 19 years old, out on Siesta Key Beach. Loved it.
So how did you get introduced to the Army? was there a recruiter or?
I remember taking the ASVAB test. I think many of us remember taking the ASVAB test in high school, right? And shortly after I took that, I had gotten contacted by every branch of service, and I had scored apparently well enough that they were interested, but it just didn't seem like anything I knew about, and didn't do it. But by the time I was 20 years old and said, boy, there's got to be something else, I talked to the recruiter. They decided I needed to take the ASVAB again. I don't remember what I did on the first one. I did well enough on the second, and they said, you can pick any MOS, any career field you want. And so I was going through the book in numerical order. At the time, there was 95 Bravo, which was MPs. And I got to the 95s, and I saw this MP. There was a picture, and there was actually a woman in the uniform with a gun on her hip. And I'm like, that's me. I want that. And so I went home and told my dad what I wanted to do. They didn't draw up the contract, even though I was 20 and could have signed. I went home, told my parents. My dad was like, I'll go. So he came back with me to the recruiting station the very next day. He sure did. And he said, okay, show me. So I showed it to him, and we turned the page a couple more, and we got to the 98 series back in the day, which is now the 35s, which are Intel. And there was one which was an Army linguist, and you could learn a foreign language. My dad knew how to speak German, Pennsylvania Dutch. And that had always fascinated me as a kid, when he and his brothers or my grandparents would sit around, and it's like, that's not fair. I want that. And I had taken French and Latin in school because I thought I was going to be a doctor. And then once I started through college and realizing how long this was going to take me, the doctor thing sort of fell by the wayside. But I had taken Latin and French in high school. So the language was interesting. And then I found out I could get, wait for it, $3,500 as a sign-on bonus, which in 1980, oh my God, was so much money. I thought I could buy a car. It was just crazy. And I was like eating cereal for breakfast and for supper because I had my own little apartment with another girlfriend, but we had no money. And so $3,500 plus a guaranteed paycheck, I'm in. So there I went. And after basic training at Fort Jackson, I ended up at Monterey, California for a year. Not a bad gig, but they made me pay for it. The Army gets back. If you get a great assignment, wait for it. As you know.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it comes next, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how these opportunities, just sort of come to you. And I talk to people who tell me, oh yes, I plan to do this and this and this, and that was my goal. And I personally had these great things just kind of happened and said, oh, okay, I'll try that. And it sounds like, Phyllis, you were blessed with those great opportunities that kind of just came to you. Obviously, you were worthy of them. And you earned them, but nevertheless, they presented themselves.
Yeah, I'd say I'm more a seat of the pants kind of person. Yeah, just whatever happens, go with it, grab it, run with it, and you'd be amazed when you bring your head back up for catch a breath of air and you look around and say, wow, that was fantastic.
So what were your challenges as a young enlisted woman?
Again, I spent a lot of time with my brothers and their friends, and sure, I mean, the fun challenges, as you can imagine, I turned 21 in basic training, and in basic training at Fort Jackson in 1981, there was a group of drill sergeants that were taking advantage of the female enlistees. And at one evening, about 8, 9 o'clock, 4 of us females, is our turn. We're on the DA6, the task roster, if you will. And we were taken over to a building to clean the bathrooms and the office spaces. And as we were doing that, sure enough, something bad started to happen in the room that I was in. And we were all 4 females in a different room each. And this gentleman, I call him a gentleman, he was a jerk, and an NCO. And of course, I'm a private, and you're scared to daylights from any NCO. But he started walking towards me and said, you've been here 5 weeks, you want it. And it took me a moment to realize what he was alluding to, but I let him get close enough, and sorry, I've done it to my brothers. I had no trouble doing it to him. I need him like nobody's business. Fell to the floor. I couldn't get the door. My hands were shaking, and I was yelling for, not scared, just yelling to find my other 3 teammates. Mm-hmm. And we hightailed it out of there and ran 2+ miles back to our barracks. Went to and reported it. Our drill sergeants came in. We had 1 male and 1 female drill sergeant. We were 1 female platoon, 3 male platoons in our company. And they were livid. And you know what? I just trusted that they were going to take care of it. So I don't know what came of that, but I have a feeling that was a ring that was probably, now in hindsight, at the time, it's like, I got my licks in and we got the hell out of there. But yeah, there are those challenges.
There are those challenges
that I'm sure a lot of women, but I can tell you this, as I look across the military, there are so many honorable men there. And I have worked too, in my 37 years in the military, I've worked a number of years in the civil sector because I was a true Army Reserve soldier. So I worked, excuse me, I worked full-time as a civilian, and I worked and as a nurse, because I did go back to school after I left active duty after 4 years. I went back to school, became a nurse. And I got to tell you, the doctors, civilian doctors are no better off, and if anything, I would argue, are far worse than any of the men I ever encountered in the military. So to say that the military has some degree of, discomfort with those men that take advantage, and or I suppose there are women that do the same, but definitely we know from our perspective as men. So I really only had 2 incredibly uncomfortable events like that in my entire military career. I had more than 2 in my civilian career that got me much closer to being afraid for my life.
Yeah, and I think it's, for those of us who can kind of have the long view back, over time, we've seen the structure put in place to be able to report those things, to educate both our men and women on how to handle those things so that our attention can be to the mission, not having to do those things. Right. And it's not perfect, certainly, but I like to think certainly that perhaps we were part of that structure in putting things in place and making a difference for those women serving today.
I agree with you. And I think, we look at the way things and the case for reporting and how people can report now makes a big difference. And it is important that we shake out and find the bad dudes in our organization and get them the heck out, because there's no place for that. One of the things that I saw one time, I was in Iraq and I talked with a young soldier, and she was very distraught and getting ready to go out and drive on a convoy. And as it turned out, she was being taken advantage of sexually by her platoon sergeant, which we remedied that, at least got that platoon sergeant gone. But, the thing is, when you're in a combat zone in particular, and I think, this may hit for some women, is you realize there's an enemy out there. And somehow you've got to wrap your brain around what could happen if the enemy gets hold of you. But you should never have to wrap your brain around what happens if a man that wears the same uniforms, same color and everything as you gets a hold of you. That should be your safety zone, not the other way around. And I think that's where the trauma really hits, is that they were supposed to be like my brothers. I knew, even though my brothers were 1 and 2 years younger than me, it didn't take long till they were much larger than me. And so when things, when somebody was being a jerk, I could always rely on my brothers and, let them know, and they would take care of it, and I know it's a different era. But I think, it's one of those things that we always know we should be able to trust everybody in our formation, and there should never be that question. And once that seed is planted, it's very hard to undo it. So yeah, but for me personally, two events ever, and that made me feel really scared. Yeah, I've been uncomfortable. We've all been
Sure.
uncomfortable. But I think it's you learn over time how to approach and address those. When somebody says an off-color comment that you just know isn't right, speak up. But that takes time. Because
and we have to encourage other, women and men to, if there are offending actions, that we have to speak up and we have to report it and we have to make the system work.
Because I think that goes to the crux of this discussion is leave your mark. How do you leave a mark? The mark you were meant to leave when it's been interrupted by something like this. Exactly. And that's a shame. Yeah. But fortunately for me, while there were a few situations that I did not care for at all, and we reported that, and I'm sure they did the investigation. I just have to trust that at that point. And then later on, there was another event that I know for a fact that was investigated, but it was not. I mean, I guess you would call it. It's actually definitely harassment. He never touched me, but he got so danged close, and my back was up against the wall that I was. And it took a minute till I realized, wait a minute, who are you? And to push him back and go, you need to stop. But initially, because they're in a position of power and authority over you,
sure,
you yield. And I don't understand, and I'm thinking, I'm a strong woman. Why did I do that? And so it can happen to any of us, and we have to realize that.
For sure. Yeah. So you stayed for your initial assignment. You completed a 4-year enlistment and then decided to leave. Did you? I know you were a mom. Did you get married during that time and have children? Or tell us a little bit about
lovely Monterey, California. I got to tell you, you meet a lot of great people, and I met a wonderful person. Had served already one tour in a field station Berlin, and had come back to get his German language, as had I. And he was my class leader. And it did not take long. We fell madly, madly in love, got married there. So we made sure we could be assigned once we graduated in the same area. And sure enough, got married later that year. And while I had follow-on schools even after Monterey, got pregnant, reported to my first duty assignment, pregnant. Not cool. Not cool. It was a very tactical assignment, and defending the Fulda Gap back in the days, for any of you that remember the good old Fulda Gap of Germany. Okay, that was us. And you don't arrive there. I was about 8 months pregnant when I showed up. Yeah, as a specialist. Not, so I had a lot of proving that I was, and shortly thereafter, even with all precautions, my first son was maybe 10 months old when I found I was pregnant again. And of course, all of the fun allegations, still stationed in Germany in a very tactical unit, defending, so all of the rumor and scuttlebutt, of course, that I had gotten pregnant a second time so that I wouldn't have to go to the field. Now, I mean, my husband never got questioned that you're become a father just so it didn't keep him out. But we just decided to be in the military with 2 little rugrats was just a problem that and I knew I wanted to go back to school. I now had at that time it was VEEP, like the GI Bill. And so I had the money now to go back to school. And so I agreed, and actually got out as an ROTC cadet. Had already been brought in. But sadly, life throws you curveballs, and you got to learn to swing. That's all I can tell you. My husband got selected for Warrant Officer School. And even though his first assignment was in Germany, Field Station Berlin, second assignment was in Frankfurt, Germany, he was already notified that once he finished all of his warrant officer training, he was going to Augsburg, Germany next, while I was going to be finishing up my last 2 years. Well, I was there for those 4 years in Germany, 2 years after I finished all my schooling. I did complete my associate's degree online and at the little signal unit next door to me. So found ways to get that done. So I was going to start my junior year of college after I left the Army, and was going to have those 2 years. But about the time I was going to start as a junior in a nursing program, my husband was going to be shipped back over to Augsburg. My sons were at that point, Jeremy, the younger one, was just turning 1 when hubby was leaving, which made Joe not quite 2.5. And I thought, for 2 years, they won't know their dad during incredibly formative time. So I looked around and found actually a school of nursing that could get me through an LPN program post-haste. And the lady that ran that program was an Army Reserve captain, a nurse. And so she completely understood my situation. It was amazing. And she's like, listen, you've got all the college work. The LPN is no college. It's a diploma program, a certificate program. And you've got so much of this that we normally teach at the beginning. We can drop you into the class and you'll graduate in like 5 months from now instead of 10 months. Which was the normal length, but you've got everything else. So I did all of that. And so my husband was over in Germany for about 3.5 months before I was able to get over there. And then I thought, great, I'll get a job as a nurse at the local military hospital. No, they have a standard. You have to have a 1.5 years experience in order to have that job. So as luck would have it, I was trying to find work, and the local branch of a credit union was hiring loan processors, and brought me in for a decent rate of pay. And of course, like any bank or credit union, the hours are pretty good. And so it worked well with having children. And I worked my way up to becoming a loan officer. So I learned a lot about finance. And while I was there for nearly 2 years, they cohorted with the University of Maryland. And any courses that I took on finance, leadership, management,
oh my gosh,
they paid for them. So, okay.
You are a lucky woman. Yeah.
You put yourself in the right place.
Absolutely.
You never know what can happen.
Right time, right place, for sure. So what led you back to the Army Reserve?
Well, yeah, exactly. So I was already ROTC, and then I had to leave the ROTC program because I was not going to stay for 2 years. And I talked with a professor of military science, and he helped me transfer to a medical unit near where I was going to be finishing up my LPN program. So that was my first. And then when I got over to Germany, I couldn't find one at all. But I needed PLDC, PLDC, which is now what, Warrior Transition? I don't know what it's called anymore. For E4s and E5s, that course. And luckily, even as an individual ready reserve soldier, I was able to get in there and take that. And I did correspondence courses to make good years towards retirement. But then when we got back to the States, then I started looking more for things that had to do with my military intelligence background and found ways to continue to serve.
So what grade did you achieve as an enlisted woman in the reserve? And then clearly something steered you toward the warrant officer candidate school.
It did. So I was an E5 promotable to staff sergeant to E6 when I was already married to a man that was an Army warrant officer. But in my first assignment there in Germany, active duty, CW5 David Roberts, who was a Vietnam military intelligence guy, had supported the special forces guys over there. He was my boss in the unit that I was in Germany. And he was just that fantastic leader, the guy that you want to be just like. Like, when I grow up, I want to be just like him. And oddly enough, I got a letter from HRC, Human Resources Command, saying a cursory review of your records indicates you meet the requirements to apply to become an Army warrant officer. Obviously, they were critically short, because now I know how we do that as well. And we've sent those same kind of letters out because I received one back in the day. So I filled out the postcard, sent it back, and they said, we need like a letter of recommendation. So I reached back to CW5 David Roberts and asked him for a letter of recommendation, because he was the only guy in my MOS that I really, he wrote, I will not get choked up, although she knows I'm an easy cry. He wrote the kindest letter, and he said the last line, and I've used it once in my career, that if I could choose one soldier to replace me after I retire, it would be Sergeant Phyllis, at the time, Phyllis Carilla. And that just meant the world to me. And I thought, I cannot let him down. I'm going to get through my trainings. I'm going to be everything that he was to me, to the next group. And so one time I got to use that great line, if I could choose one soldier to replace me, it would be. And that was really great to be able to use that line.
You know, Phyllis, it sounds like you've, you have these inspirational people who come into your life, but they also set a standard for you that you decided to, yes, that's the standard I want to meet.
Yeah.
And what I just can't get over how for obviously you're well deserving for those folks to come into your life and to set that standard for you. But I bet you've used that as well over your career in as you've come across various soldiers, men and women, that you've thought, this is somebody that the Army needs and wants, and we're going to make this person whatever.
That's very true. And it's funny because I was sharing with Marilla just the other day about while I was in senior positions with the Army Reserve, and for anybody that's not tracking, the Army Reserve is a little over 200,000 soldiers, which means think how many family members, and we have about 12,000 Department of the Army civilians that are assigned to work with the U.S. Army Reserve. So obviously it's not the total Army, but it's a pretty big unit. And $8 billion budget annually, it's a big place to work for. And so when we were out doing, visiting our troops, and many times it was all components of the Army, and sometimes you'd see them from other services. But I would run into young troops, young soldiers that would ask me about, or I'd get a briefing by this brilliant specialist or a sergeant that I'm like, oh my gosh. And you start talking to them and you find out they're an Army Reserve soldier, but they're a city manager, for a city of 1 million people. So they're very comfortable speaking in front of groups. And so you talk with them more and you learn what they're doing, or they have an engineering background and you're like, you'd make a great engineer warrant. And so I always carried, I told Marilla, I always carried in my pocket the warrant officer candidate rank that we wear while we're going through school. And when I would meet somebody like that, when I would shake their hand at the end, many times with a coin, but I would also give them this Velcro patch to just carry. And I'm like, someday you're going to wear that. I see it in you. I want you to carry that. It may be a couple of years from now, but if you need anything from me, you write to me, you let me know that I gave you one of those, because they don't come easy. And again, for the Army warrants, just as an overarching, because I have a feeling we've got all the services that might be part of this. There's over 1 million soldiers in the United States Army. There's 25,000 warrant officers out of 1 million, 25,000, and that's all rank warrants, W1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're very limited. And for W5s, there's about 1,000 total in 1 million. So to make that W5 rank, it's like the old saying, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Or you stick around long enough, or you just persevere. You keep doing the right thing every day for the right reasons, even when nobody's looking. And you know what? People are looking. They don't miss a beat, whether you're at the grocery store or you're at a restaurant and you don't have your uniform on. Somebody is likely recognizing who you are. And if you're in a position of leadership, you better be on your P's and Q's every day, because they will catch you. And the photos nowadays will be out there and you can never pull those back. So please be mindful of those things. I've learned my lesson. The mantra is, I will never write anything in an email or on a social media post that I am not willing to see on the front page of a newspaper. So carry that one with you.
I think that's a good life rule for sure. One of the things I always love to brag about, Phyllis, is that you're also airborne qualified. Yes. And one of the things Phyllis told me, we were talking about something that was pretty challenging and that could kind of raise your pucker factor as we were working through this. And Phyllis told me, she said, hey, I jump out of airplanes. I'm not scared of anything. And I thought, okay.
So that's not quite true.
I'm following her.
I have found a few things I'm afraid of, but I'm not afraid to jump out of a plane. No, that's fine. Yeah. With a chute. I want the chute.
I know one of your favorite assignments, Phyllis, was with the Special Operations Command. Can you talk to us a little bit about? And I know you deployed with them.
I did.
A couple times.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that's such a different world than so many of us. I served for 25 years, and the closest I got to a war or a conflict was Desert Storm, and I was on again, off again orders, and I never was there. So I got to guard Germany.
Well, an important task at the time.
Well, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. But nevertheless, and you do what you have to do. But tell us, and I'm sure a lot of the folks that are participating today may have had the same experience I had. So,
well, as 9/11 happened, I was a platoon leader for an intel unit, for obviously a platoon. And as our structure was, I was a CW3, and every one of my squad leaders, this is the antithesis to everything I knew from basic Army structure. Every one of my squad leaders was also a warrant officer, a W2 or a W1, and then our enlisted arrayed across there. And each of these squads were a team that did a very specialized, very highly classified mission. So we had different languages, we had different technical experts down each squad. And after 9/11 happened, my Uzbekistan team, I had a guy that spoke Uzbek, and his entire team pulled away and deployed almost immediately. And then another squad, and then finally we had 5 squads, and so I had 3 squads left. And then they wanted the rest of the platoon to go, but they were all going to get parsed out. They didn't need a platoon leader. So here I am standing there as a platoon leader with no platoon. I did get to go up to Fort Dix to get those last 3 squads through the deployment cycle, which was eye-opening, learned a great deal. And still, many of them still call me mom to this day. Not because I was that much older, but boy, I shepherded them through. I was a little frustrated with some of the demeanor of a few of the folks that were helping us process. But then now I'm alone and unafraid and waiting to see, is my battalion going to get mobilized and do something? And I got an email from Army G1 saying, we're looking for warrant officers in the intelligence community to support a CSG. And for us, that means a cryptologic support group. I thought I knew what a CSG was. I didn't. So I raised my hand instantly, said, I'm all in, send me. My unit was willing to release me. So I report, I live near Fort Bragg. I go to Fort Bragg and I go to the compound, which is the Joint Special Operations Command. And they give me this whole overview of what this CSG, which in very simple terms, campaign support group. It didn't mean anything. It's a cover term, if you will. And basically there were 75 of us ultimately that we were, started in early 2002, we were tracking and trying to find Osama bin Laden, Zawahiri, and the top 7 around him. It was 2 + 7. So we had this donut. The donut hole was Osama bin Laden and Zawahiri, and the top 7, which included Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was one of those that we were tracking after. We had pools on the wall of, when we were going to get any of these people. And so like in early 2003 was when KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind, if you will, of 9/11, was finally rolled up and brought to Guantanamo. And so we were doing all great missions, 7 days a week, 14, 16-hour days. They brought us our food. We showered down the hall. We turned in our laundry, just like if you were downrange. They laundered it and brought it back. You might sleep there. You might go to your apartment. But I mean, it was a fantastic mission. Rumsfeld would come and visit us on a regular basis. And then Special Operations Command down at MacDill in Tampa decided we needed to come down there to do this work. And so, of course, I'm not opposed to going back to being close to Sarasota, Florida. Okay. So we go down there, and the mission morphs a little bit. And then they keep bringing more and more people in until we had hundreds and hundreds. And I got to tell you, my lesson learned is when you dilute a well-oiled machine, it stops to function properly. And that's what ultimately I think ended up happening. But I was able to continue to serve from, we moved down in '03, and until late 2010, I stayed there at MacDill. And so deployed twice to Iraq, to Balad, with the Joint Special Operations Task Force, I think is what we're supposed to call it. But General McChrystal was there, and I physically ran into him a lot, because the building I worked into was not far from where his private area was. And so after we knew all the missions were done at night, was when I would finally say, okay, I got to go to the latrine, to the restroom. And I would come out the door, and of course, night discipline, you close the door and you wait for your eyes to adjust. But when you've waited too long, as we all know, to go to the bathroom, you got to go. Plus, I'd been there long enough. I knew exactly what I had to do. I was on a plank boardwalk. You come out, you turn to my left, you take 18 steps, and then you turn to the right. And by then, your night vision's coming, so you can turn and make the rest of the walk up to the restroom, right? No, I got out many nights, close the door, start walking. Right into somebody that grabs my shoulders, "Chief, sir," because I was the only female, and he knew when I ran into him, based on height and probably, hopefully, a pleasant smell. She's a woman, and so he always knew it was me. So, and I just adore General McChrystal, adore him. But the missions were high pace, high tempo. Everything I wanted to be part of was it. And so every time I had an opportunity to go back downrange, I did, whether it was they had a special treasure trove of a takedown of a house, and they called me back there, and they're like, how quick can you, I'm on first plane, I'm coming. And I spend sometimes just a week or two there, but most times it was 90 or 120 days. And that seems short, and I get it, because I've had sons and others that have done the 15-month fun. But our tempo was just so crazy. We'd have 4 months downrange, 4 months back, 4 months downrange, 4 months back. And it was just an incredible pace, but great job.
What an extraordinary story, and what a, to be a part of history and to make a difference, Phyllis. You have to walk away feeling very satisfied about that, and I want to thank you again for the extraordinary things that you did.
That's the best part. Yeah. Is you're just part of this big team.
Absolutely.
But everybody has a part to play, whether it's our supply sergeant.
That's right.
Definitely our cooks, because I tell you, we loved our food, and so when we had good food, we were so happy. So that's important.
Yeah. So how did you get to be the 5th Command Chief Warrant Officer of the United States Army Reserve? Oh my gosh.
Interesting. Yeah. So I left MacDill in late 2010 in order to take a job as back in the Army Reserve, but at full time. I actually had been on orders year after year after year, just renewing them 1 year at a time, which is, there's no continuity, no safety, but they did have the Active Guard and Reserve, the AGR program, and was able to leverage into that. Ended up here at Fort Belvoir at the Military Intelligence Readiness Command. It's a 1-star Army Reserve headquarters. And so I was one of the senior people as a W5 in signals intelligence working there, and really helping a lot of our units prepare and deploy, many times with who?
Sure.
Special operations. And so I had that network on both sides and was able to help facilitate and ease their migration into the deployments. But while I was there, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a Command Chief Warrant Officer, won't lie. But I found out then about who the Command Chief, the 4th Command Chief, I'm like, how did I not know this? I know I was busy, but I wasn't ever that busy. And so I shared with another female W5 who was the Command Chief Warrant Officer for the MERC, the command I was in. Didn't know they had one either. And I said, well, I want that job. And she's like, well, what job? And I mean, his job. And so she, really? So she made an office call appointment for her and I to go and visit with him. And we had a conversation. What do I need to do to prepare myself? Because he didn't think he was going to be retiring for about 2 years. What do I need to do? What can I work on to be better prepared to apply for this position, right? So he shared with me, he was very candid, And he recommended one book, and it's a really fun, short, easy read called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. Don't remember the author, but you don't need a title to be a leader. Wonderful stories in there, and I really took those to heart. And then, boom, it was time to apply, and ultimately got called in for the interview, and then you sit on pins and needles waiting, because when you want one of those jobs so badly, and you don't know who you're competing against, and then to finally get notified that, yes, I have that job. And then you ask, okay, so now what do I do? But
that was my next question. What do
you do? So Lieutenant General Jeff Talley was the chief of the Army Reserve. He had just come into the position. He was a tenured professor at both Notre Dame and ultimately at Southern Methodist in Texas. PhD, engineer, brilliant man, has 4 master's degrees. Just incredible. And so he was an interesting individual to work with. And so he had to sell and divest himself of his engineer firm in order to do the 4-year tour as the chief of the Army Reserve. So we both learned a lot about the inner workings of the Pentagon in those 3 years. But we also did a lot of divide and conquer between the Command Sergeant Major, myself, and General Talley. We went out battlefield circulation. We're in every state, every territory, and around the globe we have Army Reserve units. As well as there are times when, at the time was General Odierno, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army, that if he knew one of us was going someplace in particular, we would sit down with both him and the National Guard leadership. So we would divide and conquer. If there was an Army issue that needed to be addressed, we always made sure we talked to that at our town halls, and to make sure the message and that themes were matching. We had monthly themes that we worked to continue out. But really just talk with the troops, find out, get a good pulse of what's happening there and how we can identify and streamline processes, because there are a lot of things that, boy, the soldiers out there they just think we know it up there in the Pentagon, and we don't. And so when you're out there and you have that opportunity to really talk with them and learn, and many of them have the solution right there.
Right. And there's such a dynamic environment today. So they can certainly bring a lot to the table, for sure.
So I learned the difference too between statutes and policy. I didn't know until then, but worked a lot up on Capitol Hill as well, advocating for things that had to do with not just Army warrant officers, but Army writ large, and not just the Army Reserve. So we learned how to collaborate, and I got to tell you, you think everybody up there on Capitol Hill knows their stuff too. I've been up there in my dress blue uniform, before with the pink and greens, in my dress blue, and have had not staffers, but our elected senators or representatives ask me, what country am I from with my uniform on? And, it's easy if I would have been there in my dailies, in my utilities, where it says U.S. Army on it. It doesn't say that on our dress uniform. So you have to very politely inform them on, this is the United States Army uniform. Really? I didn't know that. Yeah. Well, when did you guys switch to that? And you want to be really polite about it, but, a while. But no, so, you just don't realize, they're so busy looking at so many other things that trying to keep up. And now, of course, we're changing uniforms again, at least Army-wise. It is hard for them. And the staffers tend to try to, bring them along like we do for our bosses in the military. I would always, like if there was a Gold Star family member coming up to shake hands with my boss, I would always make sure he knew, because that pin is small. But I have such dear friends that are Gold Star family members, meaning that they have a family member that was killed while serving, that I would always want to make sure he was mindful and to thank them or to ask them about who in their family gave their life. And they want to talk about it most of the time. And so that's one of those things, just take care of your leadership, and your leadership will take care of you. Don't you think?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Phyllis. Yeah, so looking back over that incredible 37-year career, can you kind of give us sort of your lessons learned? Is it, if you could do your top 3, what or whatever?
Oh yeah, let's see. I wouldn't change. I have a lot of people ask me, why didn't, as a nurse, because I became a registered nurse, why didn't I switch to become a commissioned officer? I'm like, I am a commissioned officer as a warrant officer. Thank you very much.
Another lesson that you're
Yes, yes.
teaching.
So I am a commissioned officer. I'm happy to do that. I can do re-enlistments and all those great things, and render UCMJ action when needed if I'm in a command role. I would not change that for a minute. You know, life is very interesting how you route your paths through. But the one thing I can tell you I always wanted to be mindful of from the beginning, and I don't know where this came from, is that I would much rather have failed trying to do something than regret that I never tried. Because when I'm much older, and I'm feeling old some days already, but when I am much older, and whether I'm on a front porch or out on a lake or wherever I may be, I don't want to regret that I didn't even try for it. Because you know what, we all fail. That's part of how you learn to do something differently or better. Failure is part of the life cycle. You've got to accept that. I always said I have a fear of failure. For the really important things, like jump school, airborne school. I was not coming back to an airborne unit without those wings, was not happening. So you find a way to get through, and it truly is mental. There is so much that this body can do for you that sometimes you think you can't. But if your mind tells you you can, you can. Mm-hmm. And that's what I learned, certainly in jump school and in other opportunities. Certainly special operations is a great, when they can be low key, they certainly are. And that's fantastic. But when they, when the mission calls for it, you better be able to hang with them. And so I learned how to push myself physically much more at a much later age than I expected, because when I got there, and if I give myself away, I was 42 going on 43. Well, I was a good runner. I became a really good runner by then. Never was a great runner, but you know, I can run 10 miles, maybe not right now, but I could run 10 miles and never have to stop. But it wouldn't be fast, might be, you know, 8.5 or 9 minute miles where these guys are running blazing speeds, but they always knew I'd be there. So that was important, is to, and I think lastly, you've got to follow your own path. I will self-admit I was married twice to 2 different soldiers, both of whom knew I met them while I was in the service, but somehow they, maybe not all men, but those 2 had an idea that that I would be much better suited to be a stay-at-home wife as opposed to a soldier. Mm-hmm. And I never asked them to pick one or the other, and I didn't understand why there should be such a diverse feel on why can't a woman be a soldier, a wife, and a mom, when a guy can easily be a soldier, a husband, and a dad. And I just thought, no, I did that once when the boys were very little, but by the time I was in my 40s, of course, you know, my kids were grown, and now proud to tell you that in the Army, out of 2 marriages, have 8 kids. Very proud of all 8 of them, 4 of whom serve in the military, and one of my daughter-in-laws also serves. 12 grandbabies, no, 11, 12. By the time this plays, I'll have 12. And I love that. That is the best job ever. Next to the memorial behind us, this is everything I did in the military, I will tell you, God's way, his path, got me prepared to do exactly what I'm doing here. I love this job, as you know. And Marilla's been here ever since it opened. And she's been faithful and loyal, and she's a walking history book of everything that has to do. And many people that have graced those halls behind there, it's more like a museum than a memorial. It does memorialize every woman that has ever passed that served. But it's an education center in there as well. And I want to tell you about that. Am I able to do that?
You absolutely. I do want to close with, I want to thank you for being so candid, about your career, about your choices. I love the way you closed with speaking about a challenge that so many of us have faced with respect to marriage and kids. Yeah. It's tough, and the world has changed so much and asks so much of us as soldiers. It is a tough challenge. So thank you for speaking to that. So yes, let's turn to the Women in Military Service for America Memorial. Tell us, for those folks who don't know about the memorial, tell us about it.
She should be doing this. But I will tell you what I know, and she's going to layer in and give you the better nuggets. How's that? So yes, this memorial is at the ceremonial entrance to Arlington National Cemetery. As you can see behind us, those white markers going up the hill towards Arlington House are gravestones. And so there are hundreds of thousands that are buried there, as well as inurned, meaning that they were, I'm trying to fix my computer. I'm very sorry. It probably is going to do just fine. So in '97, it was opened. It is 33,000 square feet. There's a 200-seat theater there. And there is a storyline, this great long wall on the backside of where you see the banners hanging. Inside, there is a chronological storyline from the Revolutionary War, when our women were either camp followers or they disguised themselves even back then as women, as men serving as soldiers. Some not even discovered as being a woman until they were killed in action on a battlefield. And that was when they realized, whoops, that was a woman. So yes, we continue to tell the story all the way to today. We just did Memorial Day, and we certainly honor every woman that has given their life in service to the country. And we also honor all of you that are either currently serving and have served, and those that came before you. So we have a register that I'd like you to talk about a little bit. This is the heart of our memorial, right?
It is the heart of our memorial. The register is an interactive database, actually, that tells your story, that gives you an opportunity to take your rightful and visible place in history for all time. To register, what does that mean? Register your service. We ask you to tell us a little bit about your service, your awards and decorations. Send us a picture, and it is preserved for all time. Your family and friends well into the future can come to the memorial and key in your name, and up pops your picture and your story. Today we have about 269,000 women's records of service that we've preserved here at the Women's Memorial. And that's substantial, but when you consider that some 3 million women have served, that is just barely 9% of the number of women who've served. So our job as the Women's Memorial, and our mission is to tell that story of women's service. We'll never be able to do that completely until we've been able to get and to capture and to preserve the stories of all women who've served. We're getting ready to launch a registration campaign to try to boost those registrations, and to help get the word out, and to encourage women to register their service, or to register, if you know of a woman who served, past or present, living or deceased, to register her service with the memorial. And I'm going to let Phyllis speak a little bit more about that registration campaign and the efforts that she is putting together to make that a success.
Right. So here in Virginia is where we're going to actually do our pilot on the registration campaign. So you'll see more social media and more marketing out there coming very soon. Our goal is, from the time we launch, which will be in June of 2020, is in 12 months to achieve 100,000 additional new women being registered. In other words, tell your story at the memorial. We have all kinds of people that do research, and they look at all of the different generations of women that have served. And one of the great parts in there is it comes up as like frameable 8.5 by 11 printout, very glossy. You have your photo in one corner, your highest rank, your term years that you served, the branch of service in which you were in, your awards, decorations. But the fun one is your most memorable experience. And we just, I can never get enough of those. I'll never get through all of what we have, but I encourage you to start thinking about what were some of your most memorable experiences that you can share with the Women's Memorial. That when we pull these things up randomly, we have on our website right now an interactive map you can go to. You can click on your state or any state, and up will pop one of these stories of a woman that has registered their service with the memorial. And it's just fascinating what they've done. And Virginia has been really one year, this is the state in which this memorial sits up here at Arlington National Cemetery. But we've reached out again for the state giving campaign, which all of the states helped us build this memorial back in the 90s, Virginia being one of them. And we've started asking because we're at 23 years this year. So soon we'll be at the 25th, but we're getting ready to do a major renovation of the inside of the memorial, which is going to cost millions of dollars. So I spoke at the Virginia legislature earlier this year, and in this budget for 2020, we were added in for $75,000, which we're so grateful for. But it may be taken away simply because of the COVID and the need for other issues than the memorial. So we have to wait and find out that. But a lot of our donations come from women that have served and are aware of the memorial. I will admit that in '97, while I had been in the Army for 16, going on 17 years, I did not know about the memorial. Otherwise, I probably would have made the trip. 40,000 people were here for this memorial, including 2 women from World War I. World War I, not II, one. They were over 100 years of age, and they spoke. And one of them said, Marilla, what did she say?
She said, when I served in the Navy, women couldn't even vote. So you think about that. These women who raised their right hand, promising to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and they didn't even have the basic right to vote. So it was their service, actually, that the service of the women of World War I, that was sort of the tipping point for the ratification of the 19th Amendment that gave women the vote. So I'm always proud to tell that story. But I do want to stress that, you know, we have so many women say, well, I didn't do anything important. Let me tell you, the very fact that you raised your right hand and again promised to support and defend the Constitution of the United States makes you a hero. And you, by raising your right hand, you pledged to do whatever your service told you that you were going to do. That was obviously within the law, but I mean, if you were going to deploy, if you were going to scrub floors, whatever, that's what you promised to do, and you did it. So don't ever think that what you did was not important. As Phyllis always says, that, you know, it's a team that comes together to complete a mission, and every one of us has a place in that team to get us to that goal.
Yeah, and every one of us gets us where we all leave a mark.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't leave a mark by myself, I can tell you that. Just like with the lady from, what was her name, from World War I?
Her name was Frida Harden. She
Frida
came all the way
Harden.
from California.
To be here for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, she stood next to a woman astronaut. Now, did World War I women, did they leave a mark? Oh my gosh, yes. And we all are doing it in our own little ways. And many of you never heard of me before today, and many of you may not have an impact. But for those that we reach and the mission of the memorial, you know, it's just such an important story to tell. But we all have stories to tell, whether it's this lady that, and whether you're an astronaut, you're a supply sergeant, you're a bath and laundry unit, or mortuary affairs. Oh my goodness, have they been, sadly, the toll on so many of those service members. But bath and laundry, I didn't even know there were such units until I needed one. And then, oh, what lovely thing to get a shower, right? So, I mean, every little cog in the wheel, the Army, the military writ large, I'm sorry that we're isolating on the Army, I don't mean to do that. But the military only develops out the skill sets and the tasks and jobs that are necessary to complete a mission. So if any of you still do the I just, or I'm not really a veteran because I didn't deploy, I'm going to leave you with my last story and then we'll close off because I know we've gone long. I was really torn 12 months ago was exactly when I was deciding whether to apply for this job to become president of the Women's Memorial. And I really thought, no, I'm a soldier. I'm not a woman soldier. It's all about being, a military person. And I parked in a parking lot at a grocery store. And sure enough, veteran parking spot. And a gentleman called me on it. He sure did. He said, "Hey, excuse me, that's veteran parking." And I'm thinking, you want to say something, but I can tell you on social media, I have seen so many other women veterans that have had the same thing happen. And yes, sir, thank you. And he says, "Is your husband with you?" "No, it's all me. I'm a veteran." "When did you serve?" So we went through the whole, and I was just having fun with him, and I guessed rightly that he was in fact a veteran. That's why he was challenging me the way he was. But as I got into the grocery store, I wasn't angry with him. I love those kind of dialogues. I really do. They're fun.
Opportunity to educate.
Absolutely. And, but I thought, boy, if I had been a man that hadn't served and decided I wanted to park there, he wouldn't have said anything to me. And I just thought we've got to, and that's why this Military Women's Memorial, to honor the 3 million women that have served and defended this great nation, we deserve a place that we can come and honor our own and tell the story of what we have done to defend this nation. You want to finish with the great quote that's up on the glass tablets on the roof that you might be able to see. There's quotations up there, and one by an Army nurse in World War II.
Yes, an Army nurse. She was a lieutenant serving in the China-Burma-India campaign. And she had friends other nurses who were flying the hump over the Himalayas, and the plane that they were in crashed. And so they buried them in a camellia grove there in Burma. The woman's name is Ann Sosh Brim, and Ann was from Kansas City. And Ann wrote to us, and she said, "Let the generations know that women in uniform also guaranteed their freedom, that their resolve were just as great as the brave men who stood among us, and that with victory our hearts were just as full and beat just as fast, and the tears fell just as hard as though for those we left behind us." And so that's kind of become our mission statement, to let the generations know that women in uniform also guaranteed their freedom. So thank you, Phyllis, for
thank you
for taking us on this journey, and your great wisdom and the inspiration that certainly you continue to give me, and I'm confident our audience today is going to walk away and say, "Yeah, I can do that."
Yeah, leave your mark. That's our challenge to you. Leave yours. You can do it. Thanks.
Thank you.